To put it bluntly, Resident Evil Requiem or Resident Evil 9 on the Nintendo Switch 2 has completely changed the system. The bar has been raised extremely high for what I expect now out of visuals for a Nintendo Switch 2 game. This game is breathtaking considering the hardware that it is running on. A 12 RAM system that's, a handheld hybrid system. I want to gush about this game for a while. Talk about some of the core mechanics of it. I haven't finished it quite yet, but I feel like most people have seen all the reviews, but it was kind of like, well, how did the Switch 2 version perform? Because obviously this is the largest game that we've seen thus far on the system. We've seen stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, looked great. We've seen Cyberpunk, look great. But I think this is in a whole nother class. This is in a whole nother realm, and I was very curious to see how it was going to work out. So let's get the basics out of the way here. Resident Evil Requiem is a game in which you play as two separate characters. You play as Grace Ashcroft, who works for the FBI. The Ashcroft name should ring some bells if you're a diehard Resident Evil fan, and of course the fan favorite Leon Kennedy. Now, the way that they kind of divvy up these two characters is actually very interesting. Grace is essentially a low ammunition, hide and seek sort of style of gameplay, where Leon is much more on the nose as far as the action is concerned. Kind of reminds me a bit of Resident Evil Revelations in how the structure of the game was set up with both more survival missions and, of course, more action-based missions. Now, as you progress throughout the game, their paths intertwine and stuff like that. I haven't finished it yet, so I don't want to talk too much about the story and the elements and how things play out. I'm about 7 or so hours into it. I may end up finishing it by the time that this video gets uploaded. But I want to talk about how this game looks. I don't know what sort of witchcraft Capcom is doing here, but they have done an amazing job with Resident Evil Requiem on the Nintendo Switch 2. We saw the preview footage from these various events, and when you're looking at stuff like that, you have to think that, okay, well, this is a very curated thing. This is something that, Capcom is choosing to show you. It's not the full scope and size of the whole game as it stands. As you could see here in the footage, there's been some quiet parts, and then there's been more open parts. We're playing as Leon right now, where the action is at an all-time high. During this cityscape where you're on the streets and there's cars and there's reflections and there's panic and chaos and stuff. And the game looks phenomenal. Like, yeah, okay, you could sit there and say, oh, it looks better on the PlayStation 5 Pro. Of course it does. I'm not comparing it to the PS5 or the PS5 Pro or the Xbox Series X. Those systems should have, there should be like a huge enough gap to where you're like, this almost looks like a different game when you're comparing it to the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game. But that's not the case with this game. Capcom has gone above and beyond when it comes to things like reflections. The game supports HDR. And one of the things that I was really concerned about was handheld mode with this game. I was like, okay, it's going to be one of those games where it looks really good docked. And then, everyone's happy with the game in docked mode. And then when you play it in handheld mode, it's going to have that nice Vaseline smear. I am here to tell you, folks, I think the game looks just as good, maybe even a little bit better at times in handheld mode than it does in docked mode. I don't know why. I don't know how. It makes no sense. But that is the reality of the situation when it comes to Resident Evil Requiem. Like, you're seeing so many different effects on the screen right now, and the game just looks marvelous. The lighting reflections, the reflections off the headlights of the cars, the way that, blood spurts out and lands on things and stays on the things that it's landed on. Like, it's just incredible. And the gameplay, because you got to have gameplay with the graphics. Going back to what I was saying, I really feel like it's a perfect blend. Like, I love playing as Leon, because it's fun. You get things like a chainsaw and stuff like that. He has an axe, and there's all these sort of cool kills that you could do with it. It's very fun, very over the top, very kind of like what Resident Evil had become. But then you have the grace sections, which is where, the game slows down. It becomes like a game of hide and seek with stealth mechanics. Your ammunition is so limited that you don't have the choice to go through and just go guns blazing. Now, there are multiple difficulty modes in this game. I'm playing on the standard difficulty with modern settings, which does feature an autosave. There is a classic mode that you have to use typewriters. There are also typewriters in the modern mode so that you can choose to make like a hard save just in case you mess something up. And then there's an easy mode where it's just more so focused on the story rather than the gameplay. I've not really had too much difficulty. I think I've died twice thus far in my playthrough, but I am thoroughly impressed with this game. Now, is it perfect? No. There's an elephant in the room that we haven't addressed when it comes to the graphics, and that's the frame rate, because you're not getting a rock solid 60 frames per second. The game tries to go to 60 frames per second. It's targeting 60 frames per second, but there are times where it does dip below, and it's a variable sort of feeling to it. I almost wish that Capcom would have included a 40 frames per second mode specifically for this version, because I think, it actually would have been fantastic. I don't know what it is about 40 frames per second versus 30 frames, but there's like a sizable difference between that. And I think 40 frames can feel really good. Going back to Grid Legends, which had the 40 frames per second mode, I loved that mode. That was actually my preferred mode. So you're getting down into the 50s sometimes, getting down to the 40s sometimes if things get really hectic. But I will say, I haven't really noticed it affecting the gameplay too much. There are times where you're moving the camera around and it feels a little bit sluggish. Sometimes your character moves, it feels a little bit slow. But considering the graphical quality of this game, considering the visual fidelity of this game, that DLSS is working wonders on the Nintendo Switch 2. And we haven't really seen many companies trying to utilize that DLSS to get the most out of it. And I think with this game, like I said, the landscape has changed, folks. This is now a different world. If this game can look and run as high quality as it is, and you could say, well, the RE engine is very adaptable, and that's true. But Capcom created that engine. Capcom realized they had an engine that works extremely well with the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm sorry, but the bar has been raised now. Switch 2 owners, you should not accept these shoddy ports that, maybe look terrible in handheld mode or look completely different than they do on the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series, because this is one of the most graphically intense games it's probably the most graphically intense game on the Nintendo Switch 2. When you're talking about graphical effects, the way that enemies get damaged and, ligament damage, the blood stains and stuff like that. This is by far, I think, in my personal opinion, the most graphically impressive game on the system. And the fact that your Switch 2 doesn't blow up when playing this is insanity. It is absolutely insane. Now, to be fair, if you own a PlayStation 5, you own an Xbox Series X, you own a PS5 Pro, then yeah, you should probably play it on there unless you are a fan of handheld mode. It's going to look better. It's going to run better. Not substantially better. It's not like a night and day difference, but there is a difference to be had on those, because those are, more powerful systems at the end of the day. But the fact that the Switch 2 is running it this well, look at this. The way her hair parted because of the way I shot her. That was freaking crazy, dude. And this chick is scary. By the way, this game's scary as hell. with all the limited resources that you have, I have shrieked many a times playing this game. So, it's definitely an edge of your seat sort of experience, but it's going to look a little bit better, a little sharper, a little crisper. The frame rate's going to be a bit more consistent on the other platforms. But as a Switch 2 game, I'm blown away. I'm blown away. And now I expect every third-party port to be up to this sort of level of quality. This was a game that's been in development for a very long time that was then brought over to the Switch 2. It wasn't like this game started development necessarily with the Switch 2 in mind as a day-and-date release. And this is where we are with it now. Absolutely blown away. If you only own a Switch 2, this is one of the best, bro. This is one of the best games you're going to get on this system, probably this year, honestly. Like, it's that damn good. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of Resident Evil 9 or Requiem in the comments section down below. Have you been playing it? If so, what platform have you been playing it on? Is it the Switch 2, the PS5, the Xbox Series? It seems like, across the board, it's just a freaking awesome. Like, this game rules, dude. Like, early contender for Game of the Year, unless everything just falls apart at the end. Which kind of did happen with Resident Evil Village, in my opinion, but I don't know. I didn't really care for Village all that much. Anyways, guys, give me your thoughts in the comments section down below. This has all been Switch 2 footage, by the way. I am uploading this at 60 frames per second, so it'll look as good as it possibly can with my recording software. And as always, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new. Be sure to like the video, leave your thoughts, leave your comments. I kind of want to drag this out a little bit because this scene kind of freaked me out a little bit. Like, I shot this lady, taking care of business. And now, like, I'm realizing my ammo's pretty low. I'm like, okay, well, she's taken care of. Let me go down here. And then, yeah, this guy kind of creeps me out because I didn't see him there. All right, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.